I want to welcome you here today to our Stroke Wellness podcast. And I am very privileged to have today an occupational therapist from Washington State, named Crystal Ricciardi. And I'm Karen Malone, physical therapist. And we actually met in China, oddly enough. And we did some training out there together. So it's really nice to have Crystal on again today. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So Crystal is an OT who does home health, right? And then you're also learning a lot about nutrition. Could you just tell us a little bit about what your goals are right now?
Yeah. Well, I would like to start just by saying that I worked as I still work as an occupational therapist, but even way back when I was in outpatient working with children, I noticed how kids with autism, different neurological dysfunctions, when their parents took away their gluten and casein out of their diet, their behavior started to change. So that's where this all started, is I started to really research and read a lot about what is the connection? Why is that happening with the kids that I work with? And as I studied, I just started to get more and more into the gut-brain connection and how what we eat really affects our behavior and our mood. And as I studied that, I just wanted to learn more and more. So I became a certified health coach through the Institute of Integrative Nutrition, so that I could work with my patients on, even as an occupational therapist, like going through meal prep and meal planning and all of that as part of their higher activities of daily living. I love to be able to integrate that into it. Like, what kinds of foods are you eating, and how can we help you integrate some healthier foods to influence your recovery and rehabilitation? So after becoming a health coach, I did that for about 6 years and then decided I want to learn even more. I just kept studying and studying. I'm a nerd. I love to read and find out more. And so I just recently decided to go back to school and studying human nutrition and functional medicine at the University of Western States in Portland. So just really wanting to help people just at that next level of, okay, we can go so far physically, but there's so much more we can do inside and make those connections between the gut and the brain. So
exactly, yeah, nutrition plays a big role in our brain function, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. Huge. And just as I work with people in all different areas, I think, wow, it has such an effect. So.
Yeah, and we think of nutrition as making a big influence or impact on wound healing. I mean, those are things people can actually see on their bodies, that when they've had a stroke and they've had damage or injury to their brain, that I would think that diet would be huge, really.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's been a lot of studies done on traumatic brain injury too, and stroke, and how the gut bacteria completely changes after a stroke or traumatic brain injury. So there's a lot more research coming out in that area.
And is that due to the actual movement that's happening in the gut for the stroke patient, or what's causing that change?
Probably just the insult to the brain and how we make different, even neurotransmitters within our gut, and it has to do with that gut-brain connection too.
Yeah.
So any insult to the brain is really disrupting that whole gut-brain connection as well.
Wow.
So it is changing the way that our gut is being fed, like all the good bacteria is being fed, and just the inflammation overall is happening. So how do we cut down on the inflammation to change?
Exactly. Right. So whether we've had a stroke or not had a stroke, nutrition's a big deal. So what would you perhaps suggest are some real practical things that somebody who's had a stroke could begin to think about as far as changing their diet or improving?
Yeah, I mean, I always go back to the gut. So I look at what foods just really contribute to inflammation. So you already have a person who's experiencing the stroke. So why add more inflammation in the foods that we eat? So I always say, like, really try to cut down on those inflammatory foods, which are, sugar, processed sugar is what I'm speaking of, corn, soy, gluten's a big one. They've done a lot of studies on gluten and the effects on the brain. So those are the major ones that I tell people, like, really stick to whole foods. Like, how can you incorporate whole foods into your diet and a lot less processed food? So those are the big ones I start with. It can be very overwhelming. So obviously, just taking those little steps at a time of, okay, just start reading your labels. Even if you're eating packaged foods, start reading labels and see how much, because sugar is probably the biggest offender for
and
inflammation.
it's sneaky, isn't it? It sneaks into a lot of products that people might not realize, like ketchup or something like that,
Yeah, for sure. And I just read, oh boy, I'm trying to think of how many pounds of sugar. I think it's 6 pounds of sugar a week that we eat as Americans. It's something outrageous like that, in all of the foods that we eat. So it is like reading your labels. We should only really have about 5 grams of sugar each meal.
And what would that be in teaspoons?
Teaspoons, I think that would be about probably less than a teaspoon. I think it's 5 sugar cubes, I think, to a gram of sugar. So
wow.
yeah.
Wow, that's mind-blowing. People should maybe buy a box of sugar cubes and think about
It's
what
a
they're
good demonstration, right?
yeah, exactly, right.
Yeah.
Can you explain a little bit, if somebody is not quite sure, what is inflammation? Why is it bad? I mean, I know we probably, to a degree, we know that you sprain your ankle and you get inflammation, but how does that, we don't look swollen, we haven't sprained our ankles. So what do you mean by inflammation?
Yeah, the same thing that goes on in your ankle when you sprain it goes on inside in your gut. And so inflammation is really that fire. I call it like the fire, like the heat that's in your gut or in your system. So the same kinds of things like redness and heat, those are the inflammation that's going on. And so that's what's happening in your gut and inside your body. So I always give people suggestions on how to just put the fire out inside. We
What's
can't
the
see it,
fire doing in the gut itself? Is that, um, it affects the lining, obviously, of the gut, I guess. So how does that inflammation interfere with what should be happening there? And just in
well,
general.
yeah, the inflammation breaks down our gut lining. And so when we eat foods, if our gut lining is broken down, then there's junctions like these cells that line our gut, and they're so tight in a healthy gut, but in an unhealthy leaky gut, they open up, and then the food that you're digesting is actually leaving the digestive tract, which should be a closed system, and it's no longer a closed system. And so these, like, whole or broken down from chewing, they're that whole leaking out into the bloodstream, and then your body recognizes it as a foreign invader instead of just regular food, and then the immune system starts attacking it. So that's why it's so important to keep the inflammation down, so that your gut mostly can build up a healthy layer of bacteria to protect those tight junctions and start to grow more and more bacteria that are it's good bacteria. So
right. It sounds like, for anyone who might think, well, I eat healthy, but I eat a lot of other stuff too, so I'm balancing it out. I eat the healthy but the unhealthy. Do you ever get people saying that, and is that a good thing?
Yeah, well, I always try to encourage people, like, try to eat, like, figure out what it is that you can do that's realistic. And usually I would say, like, if you can eat 80% clean and really try to cut down on those things, you can leave yourself that 20% to not do so. But if you're allergic to foods, they will, regardless of how much you eat of it or how little you eat of it, it'll still break down your gut.
Okay.
So yeah, it really depends on the type of food, but in a normal average, diet, you
Mm.
should give yourself a little bit of room,
Yeah.
healthy, even emotionally or socially healthy. Like, okay, you've got to
Yeah.
go out and eat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So someone's listening to our podcast today, and they're thinking, okay, I'd like to start getting healthier in my eating. Um, you mentioned a lot of things I shouldn't probably be eating.
Mhm.
So what can I eat? You know, if you said gluten, isn't gluten in like all the breads and all
Everything.
that stuff? I mean, so what do I do with my life if I can't eat those
Right.
things?
Yeah. Yeah, that's where I tell people, like, think of food in its original form. How did it come? And that's how you should eat it. If it's been processed, then it's no longer what was originally made, right? And so I always tell people, think of food in its original form. How did it grow? And how was that cow raised? How was that chicken raised? Those kinds of things. But getting back to the basics. I think, I changed my diet about 7, 8 years ago, and my meal planning, the way I eat, has become so much more simple than it ever was. I enjoy cooking, but very simple. Basically, I find out what's in season and go to the grocery store and buy that, and then make my meal from that instead of coming up with this elaborate meal plan and going from there.
That's a great idea.
Food waste, and you're eating what you're supposed to be eating because it didn't travel all the way across the country or from another country in. Great way is to go to a farmer's market and just see what's there, and then like, oh, that's what's in season, that's what I should be eating. It didn't go through this huge trip to get here. Or so I think it can be pretty simple. People want to make it pretty difficult, but it doesn't have to be. I would just say, like, yeah, think of the original form of food.
Are there particular meats that are better than others?
Yeah, grass fed. It's always kind of fun to see, like, what's local, who's raising cows around you, and find out how they raise them, and support the local rancher, the local farmer, and buy their produce, buy their meat, and then you know the story of the cow. That's
That's
not always,
true. Yeah.
um, you know, feasible, but there's ways to order your meat
Mhm.
at a better source. Or even if you go to Costco or somewhere, look for grass-fed beef. Look for chicken without antibiotics. Free-range chicken, those kinds of things. So
Right. No, I know some people have told me they don't really like drinking just plain water, and we know hydration's a good thing. So, do you have any suggestions for, first of all, just general good drinks, but then of course maybe you could touch upon the stroke survivor who's having some swallowing issues and maybe can't drink a thin liquid.
yeah. Yeah, I would be careful of those additives that they have that you can add to your water. A lot of them have artificial sweeteners in them. Recovering from a stroke, I think it's really important not to add insult to the brain, and those artificial sweeteners do just that.
Mm.
And so, if you're adding those to your water because you don't like the taste of water, I would look at, like, you can add fruit to your water. You can add some lemon to your water. You can add essential oils. So there's ways to make your water a little bit better, but I'd be really careful about the additives to your water. I know they make some of those drops that you can, they come in a little plastic container, and you can add drops to your water bottle. I would stay away from those. Those artificial sweeteners just really mess with our ability to know when we're full and when we're hungry. There's hormones, ghrelin and leptin, that tell us those things. And artificial sweeteners kind of shut those off, so we don't know if we're hungry or if we're full. So our brains are already having a hard enough time with that. With a stroke too, or traumatic brain injury, those kinds of things, we don't need to add to that. So,
and filtered water is better, or just whatever?
Yeah. That's a whole other topic.
Yeah, we don't have to go into depth, but
we don't need to go into that. But drink out of a glass water bottle and look at where your water's coming from. There's easy ways to figure out where your water's coming from and what's in your water. But and that's like the first thing. And we need to stay very hydrated. And that can help with all kinds of recovery, right? Our body is made up of so much water in our cells that we need to hydrate. And that can help with so many other things going on. So that's always the number one. Drink lots of water. As far as like thickening the water, I don't know of a good thickener besides what they offer. There's different fibers that could possibly work, like guar gum, that would thicken it. Chia seeds are a great thickener, but I don't know how that would work in the water. So
yeah, it's just a tough thing, isn't it? When somebody has a swallowing problem.
Yeah.
The thing is that they can work on those things, hopefully, and swallowing will be improved.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Very good. Wow. Are there any favorite recipes that you have for a real simple lunch, maybe somebody could think about?
A real simple lunch. I always think of, boy, I eat all kinds of stuff for lunch.
I know.
I have so many recipes in my head. I typically for lunch would eat the leftovers from the night before.
Okay, so maybe dinner then. Simple dinner.
Yep. Yeah.
Do you bake? How do you prepare your food? Do you bake it? Do you steam it? Do you eat it raw? How do you eat it?
Yeah, I think it's good to rotate through our foods. We shouldn't eat the same thing all the time, even if it's healthy for us. A lot of times if we eat the same thing all the time, we can develop allergies to those. And back to the gut, like if we're eating the same thing all the time, we're only feeding certain bacteria, and we need to feed a whole spectrum of bacteria in order to have a healthy gut. So we do want to rotate through our foods. So I always think of how can I have maybe 3 different things. Usually it's more than that, but for the typical person, let's just say like have 3 things that you can rotate through. Don't always, if you're going healthy and you think you need to eat spinach all the time, don't do that. Eat spinach one day, eat chard the next, or eat kale the next. Kind of rotate through those. The same with fruits. I wouldn't eat a lot of fruit, but really focus on those deep colored fruits like blueberries and cherries, and the ones that are real deep colors. Those offer the most antioxidants and healing properties.
Do you eat fish than meat or not?
What's that?
Do you eat more fish than meat?
I eat meat. There's different camps on whether you should eat meat or not. So it's really your personal preference, maybe even a religious preference, who knows, or so if you do eat meat, I would just make sure you eat a very good source of meat. Conventional meat can be pretty toxic, especially when cooked. So it can cause aging and inflammation pretty much. So yeah.
I really like the theme that you're kind of bringing up, is this make things simple and doable. It does not have to be complicated. People are always looking for that specific diet or, real narrow limitations, and what they can and can't eat, but just some general guidelines like that, generally whole foods,
Mhm.
um, homegrown meat, basically, even seasonal vegetables. That's a great one, I think, because that does make sense. It would be more local
Yeah.
and fresh. So, and then with the water and all, I think those are all really, really
Yeah.
great tips that you've given us.
Yeah, definitely start with water. Just pick small things that you can do and do that for a week. And then you can add one more thing and do that for a week. And on top of what you're already doing, just really try to take it in small pieces so you don't feel overwhelmed. It's hard enough to go through recovery from a stroke. You don't need a whole list of things that you need to do. So I would just pick one thing, like spend that week getting in, about 8 or 9 glasses of water. Like try that, and then the next week, really try to incorporate greens into your diet. Those greens help our gut bacteria grow. They help our body be more alkaline instead of acidic, killing off the good bacteria. So, and then add in some really healthy, meats if you eat meat, and think about foods that can feed your gut and your immune system. It is about really boosting your immune system as well. So,
What about the probiotic ideas? Are people really kind of into those, and people have different ideas, but is that something to think about?
yeah, probiotics, that's a big one, because if we're taking just any strain of probiotics, say we, think we found a great one and we take it, it's not doing much. We cannot cause bacteria to grow in our gut that's not there already. And so if we just go grab a probiotic and start taking it, it's very temporary. It'll just stay in your gut for maybe as long as you're taking it, but it'll never start to grow that type of bacteria.
Wow.
So it's really about just figuring out. Probiotics are great for something very specific. Say you have like a urinary tract infection or you're taking antibiotics, you can take those probiotics while you're doing that, and that will help in that process. But beyond that, they're not going to help. So it's very important to figure out, like, what is the specific strain that you need and for what purpose, and take it for a short time to do its job and then be done with it. Otherwise, you're wasting your money. So
Interesting. What about do you get a lot of probiotics with yogurt and things like that? I mean, can you get them naturally? You don't have to take a pill?
right. Same kind of thing. It's more important to focus on feeding the bacteria than trying to re-inoculate or regrow bacteria. So there's plenty of like medicinal yogurt, so they add the probiotics to them. But the same kind of thing, like it's fine. It's definitely not going to hurt you to eat good probiotic foods. And I would say eat those over taking a probiotic, but focus more on feeding the bacteria that you already have in your gut by taking prebiotics and prebiotic foods, which are onions and leeks and asparagus, those kinds of foods. They feed the gut bacteria that you already have. So that's more important.
Okay. Just in closing, I would say, you're an occupational therapist. I'm a physical therapist. We work with stroke survivors, and, we can kind of tell them these are the kind of professionals that would be very good for you to have in your life. Now you're getting into functional nutrition, health coaching. I mean, really, should we be encouraging people to find their own functional nutritionist? Is that something we really should be doing these days?
I think so. I definitely think so. I was just at a seminar the other night and talking about the benefits of occupational and physical therapy. But right after an injury or insult to the brain like that, there really needs to be some intervention as far as that, what they're calling, neuroinflammation. How can we cut down on that inflammation so that the movement that we're doing in therapy, the different neurodevelopmental techniques, any of those techniques that we're doing can be that much more useful, because it's hard to get past all of that inflammation and just move, if we're just moving right into movement, then we're missing out on a really important piece of healing the brain, calming down the fire, right? And then moving into the different techniques for stroke rehab. So we have to look at individuals as whole people, and they have all these different areas that they need to work on. And if we're just addressing one area, then we're missing out on the whole picture. And we need to work as a team, right? And just as you and I work as occupational and physical therapy, there's so much more to that picture, right? Even the psychological piece and the emotional piece, like we can't miss out on those. So even better to include a practitioner who understands functional medicine and looking at the root cause of things, not just, oh, you're depressed because you had a stroke. We're going to give you antidepressants, which have their place for sure. But how can we work on some of the inflammation that's going on so that you will feel better and less depressed and do better in therapy? So,
in your experience, do most registered dietitians have this functional medicine health background?
no, unfortunately, they don't. I mean, I think more and more people are getting interested in functional medicine, which I think is great. Even within my program, I'm surrounded by physicians who have wanted to go back and understand functional medicine so that we can hear like a patient's story and not just that point in time, but we hear the whole patient's story and try to figure out like what is the root cause of what's going on now. And so I think more and more physicians are understanding the importance of that. And even I have a lot of physical therapists in there and nutritionists. They're wanting to get back to that, the root cause, like let's figure out what's going on here with the patient. So I'm hoping that's the wave of the future, because there's just less and less job satisfaction for people who are just trying to address that one symptom and not looking at the whole picture. So kind of exciting, I think. But it's not as easy to find, but you can look on the IFM website, the Institute for Functional Medicine website, to try to find practitioners in your area that can help with that. So,
and you have an Instagram account. So how can people contact you or find you or the things you're putting out?
Yeah, my website is waytowellness.health, and that's also my Instagram name. So yeah, follow me or reach out to me. I'd love to answer any questions too. Or yeah, I'm excited to see where this field of functional medicine is going and to be a part of it, especially as a therapist. I know there's so many changes now in the therapy world too, and just needing to really get back to how can we look at this person as a whole and make changes. So.
All right. Well, Crystal, thank you so much for being on this program today. Yeah. And just as a recap, we've talked about so much to do with your gut and the gut-brain connection. So I really would encourage anyone who's just come on to go back and listen to the beginning of this, because Crystal has shared so much wonderful information, very practical, very meaningful, and should be very beneficial to anyone who is facing life with after stroke right now, and is looking to get the best out of all their therapies, just to definitely look into functional nutrition. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
All right.